I see you're drinking coffee, so I'm drinking coffee here.
Yes,
And if
please.
you are listening, on my cup it says love. I'm sending everybody a lot of love.
Yes, this is for my code of support for the veterans. Hmm?
I love it.
So he's been a speaker at TEDx as well. Yeah.
It's funny you pick TEDx. So anybody who's ever heard me speak, and I think your listeners will say the same thing. Oh, interesting. He seems a lot different when he gave his TEDx talk. Everything went wrong.
Hello, friends. Welcome again to Guru Talk Show. Today we have Stephan. Stephan is an executive coach. He's from Boston and he's very accomplished coach, as well as he owns a soccer team and he's got a very important background which will amaze you on his knowledge and on his aptitude about handling business coaching. So executive coaching rather. So let me introduce and bring to you and welcome Stephan. Stephan, welcome to our Guru Talk Show.
Andy, it's good to be here. And I love, the smile is always that's the way we connected when we talked.
Yes.
And it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the talk show today.
My viewers are really excited to hear more from you. So far, we had coaches who were not from executive coaching background, right? And you have got acclaim medals as well as awards from so many distinguished places. That is really, we are very proud to have you on our show.
Thank you.
In fact, you had been a global advisor to the MIT Global Strategy Forum as well, right? Yeah.
It's just been such a journey, and I think I'm first off, I'm again so honored to be here. But I think the important part is, medals and awards and resumes and all these things. I think those are patient pieces of paper. While at the same time, I think in the end, it's what's happening right here, right? How do people connect with each other? I think obviously the last 15 months have not made that very easy for us to really connect with each other, as we're mostly connecting virtual. But even there, I think we learn about people's voices, we learn about people's facial expressions, we learn about how people smile, we learn about how honest people are about their mistakes, their errors, their what they want to see more, less, or different of, which is often the way I refer to in the context of coaching. And I think that's the piece we need to be very conscious of. And I believe also that now that we're moving through 2021 and we're almost, God, I was checking the calendar, May, June, July, we're almost halfway through the year at the moment that you and I are recording this. It's one of those things where I think people intentionally will want to connect differently with each other. And I think that will also reflect in the way organizations are being led and how senior leaders, managers of organizations need to challenge themselves in the way they want to connect with individuals in organizations, regardless if that's a small organization of 1 or 2 or 5 people or large organizations of thousands of people. So I think we have a lot of homework to do, all of us.
Yes. And in this new paradigm, Stephan, actually, it's more difficult for leaders now because there's no visual connect with the employees or their team members. And even this virtuality brings in its own challenges. And the leadership has to evolve in a certain way, right? And I think the human aspect of the leadership is quite important if you look into that aspect. Please, you were saying
100%. I think you brought up a key point, right? I mean, I think the biggest conversation we're having these days, and I'm having with senior leaders of organizations, it's all levels for that matter, is trust, is cohesiveness, is engagement of employees who are now oftentimes located in remote locations. And and I think the human aspect comes in a couple of levels. First is who are we intricately as human beings, and what is it really that we want? People talk about work-life balance, and I think one of the things we've learned is there's no longer work-life balance. What it really is work-life integration. It happens, in the same environment, in the same spot. There's the dog running around, and you and I have spoken in conversations on Zoom when back on my office here on the couch, my puppy's running around and all kinds of things. And I think people have developed a level of tolerance, but also I think we're invited back to focus back on grace, elegance in business, respect, inclusion, all these various topics.
True.
And then the other part is, cohesiveness, micromanagement. If we talk about cohesiveness, building trust, how do I move from I to we, I being me, and what is my agenda, to how do I really get engagement?
Yeah.
Currently, numbers, what we've seen in corporate surveys, and we did a survey in
Mhm.
partnership with one of our global partners in late of 2020.
Mhm.
There was a huge progression initially as COVID happened at the beginning. The productivity rate went up, and for the first 4 or 5 months, everybody was excited. I get to work from home, and then suddenly there was a dip.
Yeah.
And so, how do we really re-engage people? How do we get engagement in the context of people work remote? People have certain personal preferences in the context of where they want to work, how they work, what time they want to work. So, how do we build a structure now that is supportive of that, while at the same time, in the end, the company has a stewardship responsibility, not just towards people, but also towards all levels of stakeholders. So there
Yeah.
is, return of investment, impact. We have to talk about that. So how can we support both sides? So that's a big part of the discussion.
Yeah, yeah. And see, viewers, now you see what is executive coaching, right? Because at that level, you kind of look into the every aspect of how the
100%.
organization works, the cohesiveness of it. In these times when there is COVID and everybody's at the house, people working from home, there's different challenge. There's also one of the challenge called about ethics, right? Now you have
Yeah.
people who want to show that they're working, but now they know that people are not working and someone is just slacking around. So the hiding of the slackers has become even more intense in that sense, because you really don't have any place to, I mean, place to say that okay, you're slacking, right? So the challenges has manifold risen before, even when we were face to face, or we were in the context of meeting each other in the office. From that aspect, I think that the human index within an organization has to grow up so much that everybody feels connected with the organization in that sense, right? And that I think if you would like to elaborate something on what we
Sure.
can.
You bring up a good point. I think what we're really talking about, if we talk about you, I think you called it the slackers, right? Let's forget about a moment for the slackers. I think let's look at the makeup of an
Mm,
organization, and let's look where the makeup of organizations are initially initiated from. And that's really at the top level when a company starts, and what a company represents and how people best affiliate with a company is if whatever values they have is reflected in the company's values, and that's ultimately the core contribution.
mm,
And I think when we talk about slackers and we talk about, not just ethics, but let's talk about integrity for a moment.
yeah.
And integrity is an old Japanese proverb, which is there's three phases you have in life. One phase is for your friends and family.
Yeah.
One phase is for business. And one phase is the phase you have to stare into the mirror every single morning. And that phase knows exactly what you did and didn't do.
Will do.
And
Yes.
I think that's the value system really. Integrity is not something you choose one day and you don't choose it the next.
Yeah.
You either have it or you don't. And I think value systems in that respect are very important.
Mm,
And I think the other part we have to talk about then in an organization is the authenticity and maturity of an organization.
mm,
An organization in terms of authenticity is ultimately are the actions that are taken on a day-to-day basis by the organization, by the individuals within the organization, and most transparent certainly on the C level, is are they really aligned with the values of the organization? And if they're not, well, then people start asking questions. People start
yeah.
taking themselves rights, which maybe are not in line with what we want the organization to be. But there should be no surprise that if I have no integrity as the CEO, then more than likely my C-level executives or others in the organization will think that's okay.
That's okay.
Or there are certain, micromanagement is symptomatic of no trust,
No trust. Yes.
or an over fear, which oftentimes goes back to prior experiences sometimes. And I talk a lot about executive trauma in the context of pattern behavior, which is
Mm,
neuroscientifically also anchored how we think about things and how we frame things in
yeah.
our own stories and how we tell ourselves, well, that must be what he's doing, or that must be what she's doing. So I
Yeah.
think that's, again, to make a distinction about business consulting and business coaching
Mm,
and executive coaching. Executive coaching is really about um, helping you understand who you are and
mm,
really empowering you to be your best self and best version of that. And then
yeah.
really finding resources and tools within
Mm,
yourself. And one of the things, no doubt about, is emotional intelligence, conversational intelligence,
yes.
and other pieces that we really invite people to self-reflect and self-assess, and that's a big part of that.
Yes, yes. And in today's world, it is so much imperative for a business leader to have a very high level of emotional intelligence, right? If you look into in past as well, you need to have emotional intelligence, but it is just manifold increased the need of that intelligence, because
Yeah,
here now you're not in a touch point, it's more virtual. And yes, you brought in all these important uh, uh, feelings about the degree of fear, degree of
yeah.
no trust among his C-level executives. Yeah. So what is your observation within your clients whom you are serving? Is there some kind of a study that have you done? Or if not, let me not put you in the spot. Is there any observation that you say that, okay, let's improve the emotional intelligence in certain way for certain executive to react in some way? So like let's explore on that emotional intelligence part of it.
So let me maybe for the viewers draw up what emotional intelligence. I always call about the emotional square, right? It's really when
Mhm.
you talk about emotional intelligence in the most simplistic way, you break it down into internal and external part of it, and
Mm.
then you turn it into four squares. The first squares is kind of the self-awareness, being able to say, okay, this is what's happening for me right now. But it's that
Mm.
moment of gap stop where I
Yes.
walk into a room, I may start sweating, I may start getting anxious. Anxiety usually is a feeling that starts in the chest, goes down to the arms. And
Yes.
believe me, I have not yet to work with with an executive at any level. We're talking $1 million companies to $1 billion companies who has not at one time or another had anxiety.
Yeah.
And that may not be anxiety, which may be triggered directly by that particular situation, but it
Mm.
may be triggered by a circumstance and old memory, right? That pattern behavior we talked about
True.
earlier.
Very true.
So having said that, it's there's different levels than how we approach it. And I think as we talk people from an emotional intelligence level into, okay, this is self-awareness. What is my self-managed capability now? So that's where really the art form of not just supporting from a coaching perspective, but also yourself as you have maturity as a human being, we learn how to deal with things, right? We've all said that. Oh, I know how to deal with that. Well, that's part of emotional intelligence.
True.
If you walk into a room and you know what, when there's 10 people looking at me and I feel they look at me, well, that makes me nervous. Okay, maybe you've learned not to look them in the eyes. Maybe you've learned, I mean, just a little trick for your viewers. If I'm in a one-on-one, exactly, you look at, I say it because of the background you and I talked about earlier, right? Like, look at the
Uh,
chakra point, look at the third eye.
third eye.
Um, and, and, and these are the kinds of things which are little tricks, but if I'm within 3 to 5 feet from you and I look right between your eyes, you don't know the difference. But
Yes.
it's make me less nervous. It's little things like that.
Yeah.
When people give talks, I've had executives who give board presentations or large audiences, 5, 6,000 people, they have to give a talk.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the evening before, there is a cocktail reception. Little trick. At that cocktail reception, find people who you know will be there the next day. Very
Yeah.
intentionally connect with them. Because here's what's going to happen now.
Mm.
The next day, when you give the conversation, find where these people are, or even put some people in the room where you know where they are,
But yeah.
because those become your safe spots.
Mm.
And put them strategically in the room that you can connect with them. And you look around and people think you're actually talking to the audience, which is essentially what you're doing. But
Yeah.
there's not that, again, that insecurity of a person looking at you and staring you down and going, well, what are you saying?
Very
And
smart.
get kind of a, almost like these anchor points in a room. So it's little tricks like that. But in order for that to happen, you have to discover, again, self awareness. This is what happens for me. This is what goes on. Now, that's the internal side. Now we're going to the external side. On the external side, emotional intelligence then says, okay, my social awareness around it is this. And it's
Mm.
kind of in neuro linguistic programming,
Yeah.
what we talk about is cause and effect. So
True.
it's almost like if this, then that, right? Some of the people listening here, they may know an application called IFTTT. If this, then that, you can
Yeah.
program it for your phone, you can program it for your home automation and everything else. And that's really what it is.
Yeah.
When I feel this and I don't do that, well, this is how I'm affecting my social environment.
True.
So if I come across a certain way, this is the way then also. So social awareness, and then also my relationship awareness, which is how am I affecting the relationships around me then? And that literally becomes like almost like a waterfall, right? Engineers understand waterfall
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
agile and all these kinds of things. It's a trickle down effect. So
Yes.
if I don't catch myself in step one and I let that go here, here's how I'm affecting the social surroundings, and this is my relationship awareness then.
True, true, true.
And
Absolutely.
that's at the very basic level. I like to call it kind of the square of emotional intelligence,
Okay.
where all various levers really are being pulled. And
Mm-hmm.
then sooner I'm able to kind of, I mean, self-awareness, there's no question about it, is the number one catalyst for personal growth. And that's a
Yes,
big part of that.
yes, yes. And
I'm
you're
going to stop here. I know we can talk about that for hours, and I'm hoping that's helpful.
no, no, that's awesome. And I wanted to add, yes, self-aware is very easy word if you look at being self-aware. Yes, I'm being self-aware,
Yeah.
but actually it's a long practice that you need to be
Yep.
self-aware about yourself, about your
Yep.
surrounding. Is the NLP within your brain that you need to connect your network in such a way that you are self-aware in a positive sense, right? And then that brings you
Yeah.
those qualities, those hidden qualities inside you, they come out as you become self-aware. So
Yeah.
viewers, it's very important that you learn this technique from wherever, whomever. If you want to l- get to know straight from Stephan, you can go to his website, Human Innovation Garage. Very good name, right? Human Innovation Garage, that talks about all these things, .com,
And
right?
like you just gave me the gift, right? Human innovation garage. Think about it from a
Yeah,
standpoint of humans, right? We all are humans, right?
yeah.
And with humanity comes all kinds of values, emotions, humbleness, humility, or not.
Mm,
And again, that's not about blame, but most of us, for example, we very easily talk about somebody and say, "Oh, he or she is narcissistic."
mm,
Most of us, if not all of us, we all have narcissistic traits. The question is, how much are they coming out or not? But that's okay. But
mhm.
again, self awareness, right? What happens for me or to me in a particular situation? It's a trigger,
Yeah.
right? A colleague and dear friend of mine who I have utmost respect for, and I've done some studies with as well as Marshall Goldsmith. He's considered one of the top 50 business thinkers in the world. He
Mhm.
wrote a book called Triggers.
I see.
But then he also wrote another book which says, and the title is almost like the continuation of the story, right? What got you here won't get you there. That's
Mm,
the reality. There's certain things that we can't change past, right?
true.
And in Buddhism, there's this beautiful thing is, does purpose of life, or the question of many gurus, they ask, does
Yes.
purpose of life really exist? And the answer is probably it does not. And you shouldn't focus on that
Yeah.
because it's all about joy that happens in the moment. That's right here. It's about presence. It's about being here and experiencing that.
True.
And I think that's a big, big, big part. What self-awareness, right? In the perfect world, that's what it's about. It's right here. It's happening right now. It's not about playing chess. It's not about being manipulative. It's not about being in the future. It's being right here, right now. Consciousness, presence. How am I modulating that? And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And then the
And
second piece is the innovation piece, right? Human innovation. So
yeah.
we all have inherent brilliant pieces. So let's look around, and see how do we best serve each other, but ourselves as well.
Yeah.
Because self-care is probably one of the most important things we can talk about, right? I mean,
True.
I'm a guy, I've uh, 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 built 6 companies, 3 I talk about, 3 not so much. So I've earned the right to also, sometimes jump over the fence. And I
Yes.
know we're going to be doing some things around entrepreneurship and other things like that here together at Gurukol. There's things where I've earned the right to jump across the fence sometimes and say, allow me to be a consultant slash a strategy advisor for a moment.
Yes.
Because I have seen not just the good, different, more or less. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and
Yes.
and that's an important piece to that.
Mm,
Being, empathy, connecting. Again, it speaks to trust. It speaks to not over management, and
mm,
these inherent brilliant pieces we have, and we make innovation so complicated. So find those pieces that work for you. Be vulnerable about it. Be open about it, and you will find your tribe, and you will also find people that help you. And then
yeah.
the garage is where, just like you bring your car to get repaired,
Yes.
but then there's a lot of tools what they use, which are frameworks and other things like the structures that are there, because
Yeah.
the ultimate goal is, while coaching is about being a sounding board, advisory, etc., but it's
Mm,
also about not continuing fishing for you. It's about
yeah.
teaching you how to fish, and that's a
Yeah.
big part of that.
Yeah.
Again, I know I keep going and going
Awesome.
and going.
No, no, no. This is awesome.
Um,
I tell you. If you feed a person with a fish, You just served him one day, but just teach him how to fish, and then he knows how to feed himself all the time. So I think that's the main motto about Human Innovation Garage.com. Please, viewers, I would urge you to go there. It's a great site. I've been there multiple times. There's some free downloads. Take it up, read them through. You will get to know more about what Stephan is talking about. Okay, going to the next part. In corporate world, there are many models just to manage teams. Right now, I'm talking about teams because we spoke about the executive level coaching and how they're responding to COVID and the challenges here for. But see, team management is one of the skill where you have the projects, and then the projects requires a team to execute those projects, right? And then certainly speaking, if you look at the inter dynamics of the team, you spoke briefly about the waterfall method, right? And then there is an agile methodology, which is very much in vogue right now. When I say vogue, I myself am an agile coach, so I know the nuances about the team dynamics and so on and so forth. So I bring this important piece of discussion to our Guru Talk show, where Stephan is par excellence in his coaching methods. I would like to have him to talk about the difference of agile, how it's relevant, and how the waterfall would work in certain scenarios. So please, Stephan, over to you. Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the things, let's talk about Agile first. I think Agile, what's interesting, even in coaching, when you ask 5 different coaches, you will get 7 different answers of what they sometimes interpret as being Agile, and you know this better than anybody. The way I look at Agile is this. When you think about teams and you think about where you need to start it, because you started with teams, we need to look at the individual again. And we need to look at the individual and really understanding from an assessment, evaluation standpoint, self-aware standpoint, how is this person relevant to the team, and what is the dynamics of, if that's cross-functional, if that's interfunctional, in whatever level that may be, and how can we support that particular individual.
Sure.
And then, my personal philosophy has always been, and that's part of the reason why I do the work I do and why I enjoy working with organizations and teams, what we call, let's build a dream team and high-performing culture teams, is because for I think too many years in corporate, compliance has been the driver, right? And compliance and comfort is kind of what we're all seeking. And let me explain. If I'm conforming to what you want as my boss, well, then I'm safe. That's safety. That guarantees me work. That guarantees me a paycheck. And that guarantees me that I can, and there's a famous book, Seth Godin has written it years and years and years ago. It's an old book, but it's called Tribes. Right. And in the book Tribes, what he writes about is he writes about sheepwalkers. And sheepwalkers who are people who show up to work. They come at the same time, and then they leave, and they don't care too much about what happens with the organization, or they're not coming up with any new ideas. They're just coming. It's kind of like the person you called it. You talked about the slackers. Yeah. I'll talk about the people who are just in it for the paycheck. And don't get me wrong. Sometimes that's what people need to do, because that's just where they're at in the point of their life. But in terms of innovation impact, in terms of what we're talking about, agile, really behaviors which are impact, and there's a rapid sprint or whatever else, we then go into that from there. That doesn't happen. Yeah. So in agile, and from an agile coaching standpoint, it's, think about it almost like a washing machine, right? You take a pair of socks. Yeah. And you put the pair of socks into the washing machine, and you cycle it through for 45 minutes. Yeah. And you put something in, a washing detergent, but you forgot the softener and you forgot the bleach, because they're white socks. And now the wash is over, and you take your socks out and you go, they're still a little dark on the bottom, because I walked outside with them in the garden for a few moments. I'm going to have to put them back again. Yeah. The willingness and the agility of human beings. So there's a big movement in Europe about agile humans, actually. Okay. The willingness and ability to draw inspiration, not just from yourself, but also from your surroundings, and willing to take that into the consideration of creating a better self and having different influences at different points. That's essentially on the highline level, what I consider agile humans and agile coaching in the context of a human being be. Because if you think about from a standpoint of business coaching, a straight line, we
Mm.
don't look at the individual and we don't look at all the flexible points that are there. And that's where I see a big part of agile coaching coming in. And tell me if I'm aligning there with you,
Nailed
Andy.
it.
I'm
No, no,
taking
you nailed it.
I'm
No,
taking the challenge here any second here, please.
no, you nailed it.
I
Basically,
see
again,
I see you're drinking coffee, so I'm drinking coffee here.
yes,
And if
please.
you
Yes,
are listening, on my cup it says love. I'm sending everybody a lot of love.
yes, this is for my code of support for the veterans. Hmm?
I love it.
So yeah, so technically you're right. Actually, the framework, agile framework, really helps the team management. You kind of pinpoint to a point where you identify the progress, and the main philosophy: you fail early. So
That's right.
yeah. So that's the idea, so that you can improve upon it in
Yeah,
incremental steps, right? So that's one of the framework. Ultimately, it's all towards the betterment of an organization. The team itself serves the goals of the organization. So at all the level, executive level, at the team level, as well as at the business level, it has to be working in a top-notch. It's like a machine. It should all work in a proper
that's
format.
exactly right.
Yeah.
To give
So
it a little context, I mean, I think one of the things we got to talk about, we talk about innovation process, right? I mean, agile process really comes out of the innovation processes, and
Mhm.
there's a very linear innovation process, and I think that when we think about a lot of startups work at the linear innovation process level,
Mhm.
and then there is more the creative part, which Google for a long time we used to look at some of their innovation process, and we'd say, wow, this is like really almost like creative chaos.
Yeah.
Um, but it works if it's properly managed, and that's a big part of kind of that intersecting of, I think teams is important in terms of agile teams, but really, and that's probably where I always will pull back to an individual. In
Mm.
the end, teams are made up on individuals, and at the end, teams are just like if it's cricket in India or if it's soccer in Germany or whatever else it is. If I know that I'm a strong right-footed forward, and
Mm.
the coach puts me on the left wing and says, go pass it in, well, I'm going to look at the coach and say, are you crazy? Why would you, if you know that my right foot's so strong, why would you necessarily put me on the left wing?
Left side, yes.
Or I've never played goalie. You're putting me in goal? Well, let me
Yeah.
explain to you what I'm good at and let me show you, and then you tell me where I should play. That
Yes.
is essentially what, when we think about, talent, agility of
Mm.
teams, oftentimes it requires re-engineering of an entire team. That's really what we're talking about.
Yeah, true. And very well said, Stefan. There's an I in win, right?
That's
WIN,
right.
right? And then so that I is individual importance, because those skills are the one that actually performs on the field,
Yep.
So well said, Stefan, on that part. Let's go more towards your knowing you more. Okay, now we know what you do. Okay, in a sense that your background, you come from Boston. Boston is one of the site of one of the best universities in the world. Like I said, you were advisor to the MIT itself, like MIT Global Strategy Forum. So uh, what has been your experience over there? And then of course your father, he was in
Yeah.
politics, he was a mayor. So we'll talk about that more as we go by. So let's start from that aspect. Let my
Sure.
viewers know more about you, please.
So I do live in Boston now, and Boston has been my city of choice multiple times now.
Mm.
But I'm originally from Stuttgart, Germany, and it's people here in the English American accent we say Stuttgart, and that's usually when people know it. And best known for two cars we make,
Mm.
and electronics and electrics in those cars, which is Bosch,
Wow.
and the other two things are Porsche, as people
Worship.
say, and
Yeah.
Mercedes, um, which is things that obviously are very dear and near to my heart, because that's my hometown. I mean, literally, I don't live 10 miles outside. I literally grew up in Stuttgart in the city.
It's your credit itself. Yeah.
So I've been on and off in the United States. I was looking at this and laughing just the other day. It's been 30 years in August that
Wow.
I came the first time to the United States. So it's been a long time in and out here. I had the privilege to spend some time in your home country, almost 5 years in and out in India.
India, yes.
Predominant location was always Delhi for me. But I was all over. If I say to you, I was in Amritsar and at PTU and everywhere else.
Mm.
You know exactly where I was, and most people don't get to travel there. So I was
True.
very, very lucky. I was really all over, and
Mhm.
what a I don't need to tell you this, what a tragedy we're experiencing right now through at the what we thought was the back end of COVID.
Yeah,
Certainly in India, there's some heartfelt regards there as well.
true. And
Um,
he's got a privilege of knowing two prime ministers. He knew Dr. Manmohan Singh, and then he also knows Prime Minister Modi. So he's worked at that level where
yeah.
he's got that experience representing the global at the global level. Go ahead, Stefan. Back to
So
you.
the global level, see, I mean, this is the one thing we have to say. Then, if we talk about particularly the second one, we have to talk about Mr. Narendra Modi and Prime Minister Narendra Modi in context of Gujarat, which was always where he was chief minister and was
Yes.
one considered the most innovative state in India. And
Yes.
that's really how I got introduced to Gujarat. And every 2 years was a big get together there about innovation.
Hmm.
And I think still today, it holds the record for most memorandum of understanding signed anywhere in the world in terms of
Yes.
potential business creation. And I think that's one of the opportunities oftentimes as entrepreneurs. Um, and if you are listening here and you're an entrepreneur, that is certainly in the dimension of access and making an impact. One of the countries you cannot look away from. And
True.
I've had the privilege of having a lot of friends still today, and really getting to know and learn India in a level that was just tremendously still impactful to me today. So yeah, thank you. I love the part of the world.
Yes.
Um, we just got completely detracted. I apologize,
No, I
Andy.
apologize too. I wanted to bring that stretcher in our discussion. Hence, I kind of stopped you.
Yeah.
So please go back to your hometown. Yeah, and
Yeah,
your
so Stuttgart, Germany, came here, actually was in hospitality. So my beacon has always been people, right? So I came for hospitality for a hotel company called Ritz-Carlton Hotels.
Mm,
Then did the tour with them and was last in New York, hotel manager and director of operations for a hotel. A lot of people may know the Waldorf Astoria. And
mm,
then went to the deep side of technology suddenly
mm.
and build one of the first learning management systems and education technology, education access, equality,
Yeah,
and equality of education has been a big theme of my career all the way through. But the fascination always have been people.
yeah.
And in 2012, 13, then I realized that investment corporate career, I was probably, I don't want to say burned out, but I was at a level where I wanted to do something different,
Mm,
but recognizing also and honoring what I always enjoyed was people. So then I heard and learned about coaching about a decade ago. I can't believe it's almost a decade now.
Yeah.
Um, and I called somebody who I highly respect, and he said,
Mm,
come down to Florida, and I'll explain to you what this is all about." Was
mm.
introduced to ICF, the International Coaching Federation.
Yes.
And fast forward, so today, I spend my time really executive coaching, and I spend my time really working with organizations and partnering with organizations on really creating high performance culture and dream teams, which kind of goes back to what we talked about,
Mm.
agile performance management, agile teams,
Yes.
and it really in terms of industry agnostic from fashion houses to fashion designers in clothes manufacturing, healthcare companies, real estate companies, mortgage companies, banking institutions,
Yeah.
individuals, and it really levels in all different contexts.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And we was here. He's a spectacular speaker in himself. You can see that right now as he's speaking. He's spoken at many events. One of them is TEDx. So he's been a speaker at TEDx as well. So glad to go to his YouTube channel. Or his website. You will see his TEDx speech. Any experience you want to share on that on your speaking engagements? Yeah.
It's funny you pick TEDx. So anybody who's ever heard me speak, and I think your listeners will say the same thing. Oh, interesting. He seems a lot different when he gave his TEDx talk. So
Just young.
my TEDx talk was in 2016, I think it was,
Yeah.
and it was in Switzerland. I was invited there,
Mm,
and everything went wrong. My personal life went wrong literally the night before.
mm,
I mean, talk about emotional intelligence. I really wasn't able to get my life together
mm,
within 12 hours that I had to give that talk. I the whole talk, I was probably over prepared and under prepared at the same time.
Yeah.
My clicker wasn't working properly, which I realized at some point my slides weren't working the way they should. So then came the intense German out in me, but I had to control it because I knew I was on camera. So I couldn't say anything. Everywhere else, you would have just stopped and said, guys, stop. My slides are not working properly.
Yeah.
Um, and it was, it was interesting. And hindsight is 2020. So the takeaway is this. One is TEDx is not the only stage. I think TEDx is a fantastic, fantastic platform.
Yeah.
But if anybody wants to get a message out, there's other ways of getting messages out, because I
Yes.
think that's why people get so focused on TEDx.
True. True.
The second thing is, um, you know, I always look back at that and I say to myself, the message was really about curiosity.
Yeah.
And if you wake up in the middle of the night and there's something in your head what you think you need to do, go do it. Don't be the conformist who does it
Yeah.
just because somebody else tells you.
Yes.
If those two things, and you watch it or you don't watch this talk, if those two things resonate with you,
Yeah.
that's really the biggest takeaway. And I think the curiosity part is another one, right? We talk about human beings, we talk about connecting, we talk
Mm.
about how do we find out about each other,
Mm.
and how do we not judge? Because I
Yes.
think judgment is a big part in this day and age in all kinds of levels. I mean, just open up social media, you get it left and right.
True.
Um, and I think that's a third part, which I think again curiosity keeps you in the conversation. As long as I'm curious about you and I give you
Yeah.
validity based on whatever it is, and vice versa, there's no judgment. And I think
There's no
that's,
judgment. Yeah. True.
if
Very
that's
true.
the three takeaways from the TEDx talk, that's it.
Yeah, and as all said and done, if you look at the TEDx itself, it doesn't looks like you were not comfortable. Okay, so it came out pretty well, I think, from that point
Okay,
of view.
good.
Yes, what feels inside, but ultimately the perception is you should go there. We was to look at it, look at the TEDx. Also, just don't look at that. You can see many podcasts from Stephan. You just have to Google it. You'll find the podcast. He gives important pearls of wisdom within those podcasts. Okay, it's a very high value, worth the time of every time you listen to it. I heard it many times. So you please go and look for his podcast, and you'll find it very high value things to learn from there. um, as we go by in your journey of your life, is something stands out which you would like to share with our viewers? Like what is your observation about where we are going in the future? People are talking about COVID 21, 22, like going till 28 for 6-7 years. The COVID will be there. Those are the things that I think many intellectuals like you, they're planning on. What should we do doing in the future? Yeah.
Wow, so many things. So I'll answer the question on a personal level first before I get
Uh-huh.
into the larger corporate.
Mhm.
I shared with you, and I'll share this with your viewers. So I had a little bit of a hard stop in February of 2020
Mhm.
when I was walking in downtown Boston after a meeting, and my left side felt a little funny, and I felt a little nauseous. I
Oh,
think I did share this with you,
yeah.
and I suddenly realized that something's not right. And fast forward 48 hours, I had a heart attack. And I was lucky enough that I made it out of there, and I got the full works. I didn't just get the stint where you come in and you leave the next day. I got the full works. I got a quadruple bypass.
Yeah.
But I'm back to playing full on soccer, and I had a 1 year checkup not too long ago,
Mm.
and my cardiologist says to me, when we look at your EKG and everything else, we
Mm.
can't even tell that you had a heart attack. So
Wow.
that's very, very cool. But
Wow.
the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I think you know, we plan and we anticipate, if that's in business or in personal life, so many things that ultimately we don't really know if they're happening or not. And that creates anxiety, fear, all kinds of different things that are, I think, oftentimes more a burden than anything else.
True. True.
So what
True.
I would invite to everybody to do is, be present, be in the moment, and enjoy the people around you and the people you appreciate and love. That's the one big lesson, regardless what it is that you may be thinking about going forward in the future. That's a big invitation, because if you've ever read a book about, and not to get very morbid here, but the reality is as it is. If you ever read a book about palliative care, or you read a book about life end stories, the one thing nobody talks about is that they didn't work enough, they didn't have enough, the house wasn't big enough, they didn't have enough cars. they didn't have a plane and they didn't have enough money. It's about the time you spent with the people that you forgot to spend time on. And I think that's really it may sound sad to people, but it's, I've had a similar experience, and I was there. I think the second part is, I don't believe so. I think, you said, well, COVID's going to stay until the next 7, 8, 9 years. I think COVID's going to be around. Absolutely. I don't think we've seen the last version of a COVID,
Yeah.
whatever that may be, and that's just, I think, a sign of times. I think the part we have to come to grips with is, how do we manage it? How do we give it more of a, and I don't want to talk politics, but how do we give it more something like that in a global pandemic? How do we give it more of a global response,
Yeah.
that is really addressing the disparities of various countries, areas, and regions? And I know, my beloved country, India, and I say this really in the most genuine sense. I had conversations with people. There's the version of the press, and there's the version of what's really happening, and that's not
Yes.
even what's in the press is not even half the story in that respect. And that's not a political half the story. It's just the intensity, the sadness, the
Yeah.
way there's almost no family right now in India who is not affected on 1 or 2 degrees by COVID. And I mean, who am I talking to? Am I
Yeah.
correct in stating it that way?
No, you are
Um,
absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
and
And your observation is perfect. Please continue. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
so again, I don't want to belabor on this, but I think that's a reality check for all of us, which ultimately goes back to spend time with the people you want to, and really that urges you to spend time with. So I think I think people will connect more intentionally with each other. I think social media. There's an app out at the moment. I'm present as well, and I know you were aware of it as well, which is called Clubhouse.
Mhm.
It's a social media app, which is an audio only app at this point. I'm not sure what the changes are they're going to make forward,
Mhm.
going to make to going forward. But infliction of voice and hearing somebody's voice, you can tell a lot about that person. Are they consistent
Yes.
the way they show up? Are they
Mhm.
consistent what they talk about? Are they consistent? Again, it goes back to values. How are you resonating with that? If you're not on it yet, I invite everybody here listening,
Please be there.
go check it out. But more importantly, more of those kind of platforms will continue to connect us. And I think there's an opportunity, um, to really rethink, not the business model, but there's an opportunity to rethink the way we engage people, the way we want to be engaged.
Mhm.
And in the end, it all becomes about, again, authenticity, relatability. I mean, some of the basic things that we've talked about in marketing for a decade more. And I think that'll more and more and more really kind of set sail in business in a much more predominant kind of a way. And I see it, I think the other part is, if we're talking about education, I mean, you mentioned MIT, Boston has a lot of great institutions, so I
True.
have other parts of the country and other parts of the world.
Yeah.
I think the way we need to think about education, knowledge, and competency is another thing that I want to challenge people on. And I say
Mhm.
it all the time. I think, I think I was quoted, and I'm quoting. So forgive me when I say this, and all of your listeners. So I said, I think in 2016 or 17, Andy's laughing. He already knows what's coming now.
Please go
Um,
ahead.
and so I said, you don't have to be an Ivy League graduate to be fucking brilliant. And
Yes.
I honestly believe that, because if we go back historically into the most
Yes.
startups out of California, you know this better than anybody. San Jose Community College, the most startup founders in
Yes.
California, not Stanford University.
Yeah.
And people have this illusion that it's Stanford University. It's not. Is there billions at Stanford University? Hell yes, there is.
Yeah.
And is there resources and everything else? Yes. But that's not where it all came from. So I think, companies like IBM, Google, and others, they're showing us that upskilling and reskilling is a conversation we need to have and continue to have. And I think that goes back to also why I do what I do, because I think we're very quick in the mentality to say,
Mhm.
you're fired, you're out, we don't want you anymore. Well, you know what? I think loyalty will
Mm.
be a whole other conversation level in
Yeah.
organizations as well. I'm
Yeah.
hoping. I see it to transpire already.
Yeah.
And companies will look at people, because if we think about cost of attrition, we think about, if I
Mm.
hire somebody, let's just take a hypothetical $75,000 salary
Yeah.
of someone. By the time we hire and rehire,
Yeah.
it's about 1.3 to 1.5x of what
Yes.
it's going to cost us to rehire that position.
Yes.
So why don't we invest money into upskilling and reskilling? Why don't we invest money into looking at, is this person really the most qualified, most suited people? And qualified not because they have a degree from Harvard or MIT or Stanford or an
Right.
Ivy League school. No, are they most qualified based on the competency that they're bringing to the position? Or can we use them somewhere else where they can make a much bigger impact?
Much bigger
And
impact.
that is, I think, the first level conversation organizations need to have, which will create a different way of connecting with people. It'll be an empathetic connect, it'll be an opportunity to
Mm.
rebuild dynamics within teams that will ultimately create exactly what we talked about at the beginning, which is
True.
high performance culture, which are high performance teams, which is an organizational self awareness,
Yeah.
which is just like emotional awareness, right? And emotional
Yeah.
intelligence. Like,
Yes.
if
Yes.
we bring these people in and this is what happens and this is how they will react, so there becomes a predictability, which goes back to, again, agile team performance, etc., which is very, very relatable in that respect as well. And
Very
I'll
true.
stop here if there's questions you want to ask to help
No,
us,
no, this is
direct
great.
this a little
No,
bit.
this was amazing. I'll tell you. So, ultimately, organization as a it's an individual. It's got its own soul. It's got its
Yeah,
own being, right? So,
yeah,
organizational awareness is really synonym to an individual awareness. No, so that's the
100%.
big takeaway from this what you just mentioned right now. This is your time, Stefan. Just continue as much as you would like. I would like to take you back to my viewers, take you back again to his discussion on the 2020 when he had a heart attack, and it was it's great he recovered from that. But one of the fantastic thing happened to him in 2020, February of 2020 as well. He was awarded by World Human Resource for right. So yeah, okay. Now you already can you please elaborate on what you got? Yeah.
It was a great honor. So I was by the World Coaching Federation and
Mm.
the World Human Resource Conference. I was awarded 101 most fabulous coaching leaders in the world.
Yes.
And it was a great honor. And sometimes I think we all don't know how we ultimately got there, because that's why you and I coach, right? Because there's
Yes.
imposter syndrome, there's self awareness, there's, oh my God,
Mm.
how did I get here? I think it's just an attest to the work I've done for almost a decade now. I think it's an attest to having some international transparency about the work I've done, having worked with some international companies, and just being, I think every coaching interaction is in the end a partnership.
Mm.
And if that's a one-to-one client, if that's one-to-many, I mean, with teams and organizations,
Mm.
as much as I'm grateful, oh wow, look at that, I was able to do that. I think I'm more so grateful for companies that have introduced me, that allowed me to work with them, individuals that allowed me to be a factor in their lives over years. I mean, I think my longest client, and I started 10 years ago almost. I think the one of my clients has been with me at this point 7.5 years.
Mm.
And that to me is a great success, and that by itself speaks for the evolution of the role that somebody can play for you in the context of executive coaching, and kind of setting a base and foundation there.
Yeah, yeah. And your experience certainly brings about that wiseness, that understanding about what's going on and correlate with many times why coach is required. Viewers, I'll tell you, coach is required because you need somebody from the outside to look into inside, right? And give a perspective and give a corrective measures, give a framework, give an understanding about how to become high performing. So many times coaching is considered as, oh, he just talks. No, is basically he understands, and then he provides the framework to
Yeah,
what's best
yeah.
suited for.
100%. And I think coaching and there's a lot of coaches out these days. I mean, I think COVID has increased the number of coaches exponentially again.
Mhm.
um, and there's some great new coaches out there, and again, this is not about making a judgment who's good or who's not. But I think in general terms, or I know in general terms, what great coaching is about is really three things. A, it's about your own background, and how do you contextualize that to the individual. B, it's about, are you willing to ask the tough questions, right?
Mm.
Because oftentimes coaches will not ask the tough questions, and they will not go with their
Yeah.
gut. And the third piece is gut, right? You got to be willing to put your gut out there because you've done certain things, you've seen it, you've been there, you know what it looks like, you know what it tastes like, you know what
Yeah.
it smells like, you know what it feels like.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to put that out there at the risk, and I will say it as it is, there's a lot of coaches who don't do it because they're afraid that they're going to lose the client.
Yes.
Translate that into, I'm going to lose my paycheck and retainer next month because if I
Yes.
tell them too directly what I think is going on, they're not going to
Mhm.
like me.
Yes.
Well, guess what?
You
Coaching
could
is
lose.
not about
Yeah.
liking you. Coaching is about respect.
Yes.
Respect and like are two totally different things. You talked about
Yes.
my podcast earlier,
Hmm.
rawrants.com. Go there. There is a
Hmm.
whole thing on like versus respect, right? Because we are influenced by, oh my God, if I make this difficult decision, they're not going to like me anymore. I see it with startup founders all the time. Oh,
Yeah.
wow, we have this team which grew from 3 to 5 to 10 people. I all want them to like me. Well, you're not a popularity contest.
Yes.
The thing they're most going to like about you is consistency, is
Yes.
clarity, is honesty,
Hmm.
is transparency, is integrity, which we're going back to where we started, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about values.
Values.
And so I think these are the kinds of things we have to have absolute clarity about it individually. And the other pieces I wrote years ago, I wrote an article for a golf magazine about Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods was at the top of his game.
Yes.
And he fired his coach to get a new coach because he realized he needed to set a different standard in terms of the way he was swinging and his stance was and his golf swing was because he wanted to continuously challenge himself.
Yes.
And that's what he did. But he couldn't do it alone. He needed a coach to do
You
that.
did a coach to it. Yeah.
If there's anybody listening who has ever played competitive tennis or a skier
Yeah.
or any sport like that, observation helps to identify potential opportunity shortcomings. Don't look at it as an error, but do you want to play at a higher level? Do you want to play at a different level? Do you want to play at a level that you may have never thought about playing
True.
before? Do you want to be challenged to think differently? And I think all these things above, that's really what good coaching is about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well said, Stephan. Really well said. That really elaborates to our viewers, what really the coaching is about. We have learned a lot today in this discussion, and this is not the last time we're going to have you on our Guru Talk show. I'm sure our viewers would like to have you more, come back again. But in the meantime, we will kind of look for your parting message. Would you like to say something as directly talking to our viewers? Please go ahead, Stephan. Hmm?
Continue. I mean, I think you brought one word in, which is my favorite word, and which is why your viewers are here, is because they're curious
Yeah.
and preserve that curiosity, right? And I will give
Mhm.
you a little formula I tell people all the time. I talk about my 4 E's. And
Mhm.
the 4 E's are about education, experience, environment, and emotions. And let me explain.
Yeah.
Um, if I'm curious about you and I have space in my heart and my soul that I respected your 4 E's and my 4 E's are fundamentally different, and that's just a human fact,
Right.
then I will never get to the place of shutting you out or invalidating your voice, your opinion, or what you're articulating.
True.
Because I can accept and understand that the way you were educated, the emotional stage of how you were
Right.
raised, or where you're at right now, your experience, and everything else going with that has just a very fundamentally different foundation. And that's the biggest part when we think about interacting with each other. That's where it all starts. And I think it also continues then being this journey for the why. Why is something a certain way, and why is something setting up in a particular manner? And that curiosity keeps us, on the ball and keeps us looking for and searching for more. And I think that's how, if you think about how the world around us has been created, the curiosity of asking, well, can this be different? Can it be modified, modulated, moderated, whatever it may be in a word and a verb that applies, that has always driven people to the next innovation, the next invention, the next idea.
Yes.
For that matter, self innovation, self awareness, innovating self and self innovation in that context as well.
Yes. Yes. And being curious, being foolish, understanding what you want, and
Oh,
then
yes, being foolish.
yes.
No question about it.
Yeah, no question about
Absolutely.
it. Just be humble. That's the way it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
Ultimately, frankly, viewers, as we say, I've always understood one thing. Our brain is like a small computer, right? It's connected to a portal of higher being, higher knowledge. keep yourself keep yourself well oiled, like how you service your computer, right? Keep it well oiled with your good thoughts, with positive thoughts, and be curious. They try to understand how things work, and of course you will always be super intelligent. So with that, thanks a lot, Stefan, for being here.
Thank you.
We really enjoyed having a talk with you, and we want to do this again. And certainly we will continue this discussion on our Guru Talk show. But for now, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, thank you.